Yeah, I don't see a problem with that gas tank.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This week we're going to continue building this monster three-wheeler conversion bike out of a pile of junkyard Honda ATC parts. Last week we did the dirty deed of chopping the back end off of a rusted out 1981 Honda three-wheeler, and we welded in some steel to reinforce what was left. Now this week we're going to keep cutting on the frame and build a swing arm out of the original front fork that was on the three-wheeler. So be sure to stick around to the end of the video if you're curious to see how I built the swing arm from scratch. Since I'm planning on using a Honda 125M engine with an electric starter, I'm going to need a place to store the battery. So the plan is to chop a hole in the top of the frame for the battery box and reinforce the hole with some of the scrap metal. Yeah, that should be a big enough hole to fit a small ATV battery and some electronics. Now let's get the guy welded together and see how it's going to look on the frame. I'm scribing out an outline in the frame so I know what I want to chop out, and once that's done, we can start cutting the hole. Now that the hole is chopped out, let's put the reinforcing plate in place and do a little tack welding. And then we'll finish off the rest of the weld and do our best not to melt through the thin sheet metal frame. Yeah, things are looking pretty good after a little bit of cleanup. Now it's time to move on to building the jack shaft.
Have to bolt that down later.
We're going to need to make some specialty tools to square up the jack shaft. So the plan is to take a piece of rod and build a little compass type of thingy so we can line up the jack shaft perfectly square to the engine and the frame. This little chopped up Phillips screwdriver will work perfectly as a scribe on the compass. So just hold tight. It'll all make sense what I'm thinking here shortly. There, now this little guy can be adjusted to any radius I want, and the plan is to scribe an arc off the top motor mount holes on both sides of the frame, and then another set of arcs off the lower motor mount holes, and the result should be a perfectly square jack shaft. Let's see how it works. Yeah, Now I should have a couple of X's on both sides of the frame that are perfectly squared up to the engine. Time to drill the holes for the jack shaft. These two inner flange bearings are going to bolt to the frame, and the swing arm is going to mount to the outer bearings. So that way, the jack shaft is going to double as the swing arm pivot point, so we're not going to need a chain tensioner. Rad. Now we're on to building the swing arm. The first thing I need to do is chop up some scrap metal so I can build some tabs that will connect the swing arm to the flange bearings. This piece of steel is going to be the cross brace on the swing arm, and I'm just test fitting everything to make sure it's all going to fit before I start drilling holes and welding. Now just a little more cutting to do, and we can move on to removing the fork off the bike and go into town on it with a bandsaw to build the rest of the swing arm.
Hey, Cal. How you doing, buddy? You want an IPA? Yeah, not me either.
Now we're going to move on to building the swing arm out of the original rigid fork that came on the ATC110. And here I am showing off my Allen Milliard level of precision, just freehanding and winging the cross brace. I first squared the brace up with the lower fork bridge, and now I'm just tack welding it in place. And after another measurement, we move on to finishing the weld up, and then we're going to head over to the bandsaw and chop off the top part of the fork. Now on to drilling some holes in the frame to mount the flange bearings. The right flange bearing is going to be mounted on the outside of the frame, while the left flange bearing is going to be mounted on the inside of the frame. Now this is to allow clearance for the jack shaft gearing on the left side, but I'm going to show you that later on in the build. The little tabs that we cut out earlier are bolting up really nicely to the flange bearings, and we're getting really close to mounting the swing arm to the back of this thing. Now we're getting somewhere. This thing's gonna work like a champ. Everything's fitting great. Let's cap off the holes in the chopped up fork and weld everything shut. Now just a little cleanup on the welds with the grinder, and we should be able to square everything up and weld the swing arm to the flange bearing tabs. But I'm going to leave that fun for next week, so in the meantime, you can click the video on the left if you want to check out my other three-wheeler conversion build, or you can click the video on the right if you want to check out another one of my fun builds. I'll see you next week.